TSM has messed up and they know it. It looks like they might be going back to insanity. We'll discuss the rumor that they are. Tyler One apparently being denied from North American Challengers League, amongst many others. We'll get into that in quick news. And how high can FlyQuest climb now that they've gone 3-0? They started 0-6, now they went 3-0 this past week. Are they for real? We'll get into all of that in episode 131 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. We got a lot of stuff to talk about this episode, J&T. All the games that happened, all the teams, of course, we'll go through like we always do. But quick news, we got Faker stuff to talk about. We got TSM maybe selling their spot. They're partnering with someone, just rumors, but lots to go on in this episode. Let's start with the teams, as we always do.
It was because we
FlyQuest.
missed that 1 week, though. That's why they overloaded it on
True.
purpose.
That makes a lot of sense. We needed to catch up on quick news, so we will do that. Okay, FlyQuest. They go 3-0. Let's just start there. Are they back? Can they actually make a run, or are they frauds still? What's going on here?
So if everybody remembers last split, they went massive win streak into pretty massive losing streak to end the season, and they're just doing things in reverse this time. So it's a massive loss streak to start the split, and now they're about to go on the massive win streak. So I don't know, 12-6. That's what I'm looking at.
I mean, maybe. I'm not counting on it, but maybe. What else is kind of interesting is I know some people will remember this, but their scrims were the same thing as well. The rumors were like, yeah, we're not really good in scrims. This was in spring. We're not really good in scrims, but somehow we're showing up on stage and winning. And this time, as Binky is saying in the live chat, they're talking about a 90% scrim win rate.
It was
This was
funny.
when they were still losing, if I'm not mistaken. They were losing all their games on stage, but apparently their scrims were going great. So is that a good sign, or is it the good old fashioned fake scrim bucks?
It was just funny that in that first interview after they won that game against Team Liquid, I forget who they were interviewing. Was it Spica or was it? No, it was Vulcan. It was Vulcan. And the fact that they are doing so well in scrims, but they just haven't been able to translate those results on stage is definitely super confusing, considering the fact that if you have a 90% win rate in scrims or something like that, presumably you're the best scrim team in the entire league. And then to be completely winless in the LCS, the dichotomy of that is just pretty hilarious.
We've been talking about scrims for years now, and I still don't know where I fall as to like how to value them. I think I'm just in the that's fake, don't even listen to it, all Fugazi. But like 90%, like that's a big win rate. So it's like I don't know how much of that to really take at face value.
It also depends on who their scrim partners are. I'm trying to think of who were they playing in week 1? Because whoever they would have been playing in week 1, they likely wouldn't have been scrimming that much. So
100 Thieves, because 100 Thieves like nearly perfect gamed them, remember?
but it just might be interesting to know like who they were actually scrimming, because if you have a 90% win rate against clouds like teams like Cloud9, Team Liquid, 100 Thieves, even Golden Guardians, very impressive. But if you have a majority of those scrims against weaker teams, not as impressive. But I assume they're scrimming a fairly equal amount of good teams to bad teams.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk more specifically about which players we think are or what has changed, if we think anything has changed. I think the most obvious one has to be Prince. I was pretty vocal that Prince was just bad. There's no way of sugarcoating it. He was bad in the first couple of weeks. Week 1 especially bad. Week 2 a little bit less so, but still nonetheless just not what you want to get out of Prince. Prince comes back this week, player of the week. I wouldn't even say his week was fantastic, honestly. I know he got player of the week. I just think that was kind of a product of no one really having a crazy good week, but I still thought he was solid. I didn't think their games were particularly eventful though. Like the one game they won with like 7 kills or something like that. So it's not like, oh, everyone else is just carrying Prince and he's not getting any of the kills and still getting player of the week. I don't want to make it sound like that. But like, yeah, I don't know. To me, there wasn't any like crazy player of the week performance. And Prince kind of ends up getting it.
Yeah, Prince definitely did make some improvements. I haven't been. Prince specifically hasn't been very good, as you mentioned, but I still think that Vulcan has been playing relatively well because they've been getting a lot done within lane. But as you mentioned, the big problems, especially when it comes to Prince, are mostly outside of the lane phase. He has not really been positioning properly for team fights. He's been getting caught out a ton via just like standing just up in mid lane, farming waves when you're not allowed to if your team's not there, stuff like that. But for me, Vikla was definitely the biggest Improvement for this week. I thought
Really?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but going back and watching the FlyQuest versus TL game, I thought he actually had a pretty decent game despite the number of times that Team Liquid was throwing the whole kitchen sink at him. He evaded about 4 or 5 times in the early game, almost near death. That would have probably allowed Team Liquid to snowball that early game, but there was on 4 separate occasions where Vikla was able to properly buffer the W, which prevented it from being dead, or properly R people away when he was getting engaged on. So I think when I first watched the game, I wasn't that impressed with Vikla, but I think looking back on the game, it was actually much more impressive because look at all the ganks and sort of deaths that he was dodging, then what he was able to actually produce in the fights. Actually, pretty good.
I thought Vikla was terrible. So we have completely different opinions on this. I will say the one play that I stands out as like a positive was he just completely erased Jan in the one fight. And that I'm got to give credit there. That was a really it was a Baron fight. It was around Baron and he completely erases Jan. However, his first 4 deaths were all avoidable to me. Every single one of them. I can't even remember exactly how they all were. I just remember going, "Yep, that one was avoidable. Yep, that one was avoidable." Maybe I'm nitpicking. Maybe I'm a little bit too hard on him, but he was the only guy on FlyQuest to me that I was like, I'm not really seeing any improvement here. So we'll have to agree to disagree on the whole Vikla point. I think
I
that's still if I'm like diehard FlyQuest, that's the guy I'm worried about.
I don't know, maybe I have to go rewatch it again, but I was not getting that impression at all.
Yeah, that's fine. We agree to disagree. I do want to go back to the Prince point. What was I going to say? Oh, the one issue with Prince, and this is the thing. I don't know if I should fully put this on Prince. Is there was a few times where he's getting caught, not caught, but separated from his team, and a lot of times that could be just your team just leaving your AD carry hung out to dry. You remember Palafox was zoning off of the fight towards Dragon. So like I feel like your team should be like, hey, our AD carry's clearing mid, we need to help get him over to this side of the fight or else he can't team fight. So that to me is like you could maybe say Prince needs a group with his team, or if you're going to have Prince clear mid, someone needs to stick with him. The same thing happened in I think the Team Liquid game. Maybe it was also the NRG game. I can't remember. But there was a couple of times this weekend where Prince is separated from the team. That makes team fighting way more difficult, especially if you're playing like Aphelios, right? Or just like any front to back. Like if you're playing Kaisa and someone hits Nautilus ulti, it's fine if you're way out in the middle of nowhere. You could join with your ultimate, no problem. But that's the one thing that to me that stands out is somehow FlyQuest needs to make sure that Prince is not a million miles away when a fight's about to break out. Because I think if they continue to do that, I don't think this win streak is going to go much longer.
I mean, if actually I want to bring up one of the negatives when it comes to Vikla, I think specifically in that TL game, he wasn't doing a very good job of, you know, he was a bit too far away from, fights when they sort of broke out or not being in the correct position in terms of that. But, Prince has in this split a bit of a history of doing that, but didn't appear too much this week.
Yeah. So I guess for me, in short, I think everyone improved pretty much. Even I thought Impact had a much better week. I thought Impact was kind of lacking in the first couple. He looked better. Spica looked better. The only guy that I still want more out of is Vikla, and the reason why I'm a little bit worried about that is because I think that's a trend, as we mentioned, that's continued from spring. He had a really rough spring. I thought he had a really rough week, even though they went 3-0. And so I'm still worried for Vikla, but the rest of the team is starting to show really good signs. Vulcan was fantastic on Rakan. Uh, that's also a really good sign because, well, the upgrade in this roster was supposed to be support, obviously, right? And that's need to see signs of improvement out of him as well.
Yeah, Impact's Poppy game was pretty beast.
Um, so do you actually think like they're back, or were you just memeing? Like, do you think like this team is
No,
going
I
to be
mean,
playing
I don't think they're
around,
going to
or where do we?
win. They're not going to win all of the rest of their games, but I think that they'll be about 9-9, I think.
Hmm. And they're
They'll
down 3 right now, so
I
you've got
think
them going 6-3 in the second half.
best case scenario they go 10-8, worst case scenario they go like 7-10. Or no, sorry. Man, when I went like that, I just thought of football schedules, so I was thinking 17 games for some reason instead of 18 games, but
All good.
yeah, 10-8 or 8-10, I think.
Anywhere in
That's
that
what I'm
range.
that's what I'm thinking it's going to be.
I think 10-8 is too much of a stretch. You would have to go 7-2. I don't think
Nine
they're
and nine
nearly that.
is my most likely, I think.
Okay. I am going to give them the 8-10. I think that's probably approximately where I'm not convinced that this team is super good. I think they're about average. It's really hard to pin down what to think of this team right now because well, obviously it's 3 weeks of LCS, but like we're getting very conflicting stories, if you will, from looking so bad and then looking. I don't even know if I would call them so good this week. Just incredibly better than what we saw. And Binky in the live chat praying for the 12-6. So I guess we got some FlyQuest fandom that is optimistic, perhaps. Anything else on Fly?
No, on to TSM.
Before we do, I want to remind people to subscribe. If you're enjoying the content, remember to subscribe on YouTube. Hit the like button. That stuff helps us a lot. By the way, just so people know, hitting the like button and commenting does really help us a lot. Apparently, it helps push the algorithm. We need that stuff. And if you want to join the live show, we're doing live shows every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. EST, 4 p.m. PST at twitch.tv/Clown Fiesta Podcast. Feel free to join us in the chat. Let's talk Insanity. He's going back in J&T, or at least that's the rumor. Is that a rumor or was that confirmed?
It was like kind of confirmed. The confirmation, if you want to call it that, was TSM's head of social media commenting on a Reddit post about who is going to play next week on the TSM subreddit. So take that for what you will, but I
I
think
can't
everybody.
take what TSM, like, no matter who it is at TSM, I really can't take it at full value.
I mean, they'd be fools not to put Insanity back into the lineup. I think everybody knew that TSM was making a mistake by subbing Ruby back in. We said that last week, along with pretty much everybody who could watch League of Legends when you compare Insanity's 6-game performance in the LCS versus Ruby's entire performance over in the LEC last year, or I guess, last split, I mean, on Team Heretics. And it was, the evidence was overwhelming that Insanity should be starting over Ruby, but TSM went with the sunk cost fallacy and was like, hey, we paid this guy to play for our team, so we should probably let him play. However, we just lost 3 games in a row because he's complete trash.
I wish we would have talked about this more last week. The reason I think we didn't is because I think we both said they would be crazy to make this change. Like, there's no way. Why fix what is obviously working? This was hands down. Everyone was had them like 9th or 10th in their power rankings. Like, everyone had them as one of the worst teams in the league, hands down. And then they show up and they're 3-3. And by the way, the guy that you have mid is looking pretty damn good. That's the guy that you're going to change. Like, it made no sense. We didn't really entertain that much of a discussion around it because I don't think either one of us really thought they would do it. And I guess I know this conversation is going to come off as hindsight now, but I'm telling you, my thoughts on this have remained consistent from last week to this week. I don't care if you signed Ruby. I don't care. If you signed Faker, maybe, right? Like, this is a guy who struggled on one of the worst LEC teams last split. No one expected Ruby to come in and be an absolute monster. You have Insanity who's playing great, and you make that swap just because you promised them a spot. This is a pro league. It's cutthroat. There's no like, oh, we're sorry. I know we promised you this. No, you play who you think is going to help you win. I cannot believe they made that swap.
I mean, I think it's just another TSM fumbling the situation yet again,
I'm
which they've
stunned.
continually been doing for the last 4 to 5 years, it seems, with all the decisions that they've made, personnel and organizationally wise.
I cannot tell you how good it felt to watch them go 0-3. And you know what? I actually feel a little bit bad saying that just because, like, I love Chime, which, by the way, I'll get to Chime in a second. I think he's playing really well. I love Chime. I love Turtle. I love all those guys. I just still, it felt so good to watch them go 0-3 after making the swap for Ruby. And that's not even anything against Ruby. It's just TSM, you dum-dums making that move. You deserve this.
It's honestly better that they went 0-3 and looked terrible because it just gave the definitive answer that Ruby is not up to snuff and we need Insanity back. I think if it was a
That's a fair
situation
point.
where they went 1-2 and maybe looked decent in one of those losses, or they went 2-1 and they looked decent, then they probably would have stuck with Ruby. However, and I'm glad that they went 0-3 so that Insanity is back in the mid lane. Just not only because I'm an Insanity fan, because I want to see good players in the LCS, and especially when they're NA talent. Everybody's been talking about NA talent. That has been like one of the main talking points for the last 2 years, and Insanity is one of the prime examples and reasons that, hey, NA talent's actually not that bad.
Insanity's probably sitting there going, man, this is so troll. There's no way you're taking me out right now, right? Like,
I
there's no
really hope
freaking
that
way.
he like starts shit posting after they win a game next week or something.
Did you end up watching the Degon interview
No.
that I linked in the thing? In short, first of all, a really good interview. Shout out to Degon. Wild Turtle was pretty much saying like, I don't really like six-man rosters. I don't really, and he was like, I don't want to just blame Ruby, but like, we did have some communication issues. I can't remember. I'm paraphrasing the interview. Highly recommend going to check it out. But to me, maybe I'm reading too much into it. To me, it felt very clear that Turtle was like, I don't know why the hell we did this. And of course, he didn't say it like that. He didn't say this is the stupidest decision ever. That's just the read I was getting from his I don't know, the way he was acting and the way he was talking about it. That's just the read I got. But I could be reading too far into it. But to me, I think I guess what I'm saying is once I see them go 0-3, I think all the players were like, "Hey, coach, you want to not do that and go back to what we were doing?" And he's probably like, "Yeah, my bad."
It was some subliminal messaging.
Yeah. Which is kind of funny because as we were talking about this yesterday, you kind of mentioned like Turtle has been on a six-man roster in the past.
Yeah, Turtle was like the first guy when it came to like 6-man rosters when Keith joined TSM, like whatever it was, season 5, when Turtle was kind of struggling. And then when Doublelift left TSM and Turtle rejoined TSM, it was like, oh, if Turtle, if you want to stay on TSM, you got to be a part of a 6-man roster with Doublelift. He was like, okay, I'm gonna leave again.
Yeah. If there's anyone that's been around long enough to know how he feels about six-man rosters, Turtle might just be the guy.
Yeah. Um.
Anyways,
I
go ahead.
Well, I was kind of gonna move on here just to a different talking point of
Mhm.
TSM, because I feel like we need to call this person out because they've been downright horrible the entire year, and they're also on TSM, and it's Hanser.
Yeah.
This guy's like not good at all.
I sadly agree. I'm a big fan of Hanser. I didn't
Which
think
sucks because I think both of us recognize that even when he left the LCS, he was probably still good enough to play, but unfortunately, that was almost 2.5 years ago.
that's what's frustrating about it is that when he lost his spot in the LCS or when he was not signed or whatever it was, we had the conversation many times that like this is crazy. He looked really good. That was Golden Guardians, by the way. That he was good enough to play in the league, like more than good enough, and then he wasn't playing anymore. And a lot of times when you're not playing at the top level anymore, you're gonna lose your I don't know, your skill or whatever you want to call it. So to me, that's like he should have been in the LCS the whole time. And if it weren't for losing his spot where we thought he was clearly worthy of having one, we might not be talking about how he's probably their worst player right now, unless you want to count Ruby. But
And it's a bit of a different situation when you compare him to other players like Dokla or Contracts, because when he got booted off Golden Guardians, I don't he didn't well, he played Academy for a little bit, but then I think he took like a hiatus for a year. And then it was only last year where he came back to TSM Academy. So he also kind of did like a mini-ish retirement in between that as
yeah,
well.
yeah, like we can't ever say for sure that if he had kept playing that he would be at the top level or whatever. Like we don't know that for sure,
But
but
I
it
think
just
we both
sucks.
assume that he'd be better than he currently is,
Yeah.
which is
Um,
not very good.
I want to talk about Chime because again, flashback to week one where he had that insane recon engage. This week he had another really good one. Like Turtle said in his interview with Degon, he said there's some communication issues. That particular engage spoke to me to communication issues because as he gets the flank and the Nocturne ult goes out, first of all, the Nocturne ult was a little bit late, so kind of on Boogie.
It
But
definitely was
um,
late. I know the player you're talking about.
Ruby had also just used the Azir shuffle like a second before that as well. And it was like, oh my god, if he didn't have to use shuffle, if the Nocturne ult came in at the same time as Chime's ulti, and then the Azir shuffle would have erased, like they actually could have won that game and come back. And
That
so now
was the deciding fight in that TSM versus EG game.
I'm sitting here going, that's twice now that Chime has a huge recon engage, and both times it's messed up this year. And I'm like, oh my god, man. Like here's my I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I could see Chime going in the trajectory of you remember when Vulcan was on Clutch and people like just slowly started to recognize how good Vulcan is? I don't think Chime is there yet, but I think he's getting there. I think
He's one of
soon we're
those
going to
kind
be
of
talking about
players.
Chime. Yeah, I think we're soon going to be talking about Chime as one of those guys that the top teams are going to go after because, well, he's North American, and two, I think he's going to continue to get better. Now, we always have to caveat that when you're playing on bad teams, it's hard to look good, right? So maybe that doesn't materialize. I could be wrong, but that's my hot take. I think Chime is um Well, he's really the Ignar that we've been looking for, and I know we'll get to the NRG section later, but you know how we always talk about Ignar's recon and finding those huge flanks or the nice engages? I'm seeing it from Chime. Chime is Ignar of like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but it's very difficult to shine on a bad team. And the fact that he can do that, and he's one of the few players that has done it consistently over the last year, going back to what we've seen right now, what we saw in spring, and then the end of summer last year on TSM. So I think the fact that he is performing well on a bad team is kind of a message in and of itself that this guy is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Because I mean, to
Um
me, it's insane. When Insanity was playing, it was him, Boogie, and Chime. They were doing everything. Like I feel like Haunter and Turtle are kind of dragging this team down a little bit.
Yeah, and so Turtle was the next thing that I wanted to talk about because even though it's very easy to be like, oh, they put Ruby in and went 0-3, not everything that happened this weekend was Ruby's fault. Just we got to be clear about that. First of all, we think it was Troll putting him in, and yes, he got absolutely dumped on by JoJo. But first of all, most people are getting dumped on by JoJo. That's not a Ruby exclusive. But two, Double Lift absolutely stomping on Wild Turtle and Turtle sticking around and getting Varus queued and dying at like level what was that? I don't know, super early.
3 or
That's
something.
not that's not Ruby's fault. Like that's Wild Turtle trolling. And so I'm sure there's some issues with communication as Turtle mentioned in his interview. We could clearly see it with the chime engage, but not everything was Ruby's fault here. TSM did struggle in other areas, and so um, I guess what I'm saying is putting Insanity back in. Not everything is necessarily going to be fixed. They won't necessarily just be a 500 team anymore.
Yeah, it still will take a lot of other improvements for TSM to, you know, make a make a push for playoffs or at least a higher playoff seeding. Because as we always say, 8 teams make playoffs in LCS, and the seventh and eighth team are usually pretty awful. So
Not to
hopefully
mention
TSM can push up to that like 5, 6 range. Probably not 5, but 6 maybe at the best. But we'll have to see.
And not to mention, there's a chance that the damage is done. Like just taking out one of your players that you took away all the scrims from him, you took away 3 games from him, like that can affect insanity.
Yeah, your
And
teammates have to then learn how to play with a new player, and it can maybe unlearn, just slightly a couple of things that you've been working on with your, mid laner that you're previously playing with, and you just lose a bit of that mojo. And like you
yeah,
said, you kind of just kills the momentum that they had, especially after week 2 was actually a really good week for TSM where they went 2-1.
yeah. We'll have to see how things go with them. Who are we talking about next, Jinter?
Well, it might be time where I owe Dignitas an apology because this team
Oh,
is sitting at 5-4 right now, and I will have to admit, although they were 3-3 1 week ago, wholeheartedly believe they were trash because the 3 games that they won had been thrown to them. But they
and
actually
you also
played.
believed they were the worst team in the league.
I
Let's put that in there.
This is true, but they actually had a decent week this week and went 2-1. So
Are
Dignitas,
they
I'm
the
sorry.
best? Are they the best worst team in the league in history?
No, I feel like we had this conversation like about some team. I think we had it about TL last split that they were the best worst team we'd ever seen.
Hmm.
So, and I think that TL is better than this Dig. So, no, Dig's not.
Okay. Anyways, I'm giving you a hard time, but obviously, I actually think it's good of you to apologize and recognize like not everything's bad. I think that you gotta own we own the L's on this podcast, so
Well,
appreciate you doing
sorry,
that.
never mind. Finish your thought, and then I'll.
No, go ahead.
Well, except for the one game where they lost, Santorum was still doing the same exact thing that he was previously doing in the first 6 games, which is absolutely nothing. Holy shit. When the game is slow and it's just like the junglers have to just play the map, Santorum is still awful at it.
I was hoping that I would get more of that from you this episode, like just salt. I wanted pure salt. Like this team sucks. I don't care if they have more wins and losses.
It
They're pure trash.
feels, I mean, when you go 2-1, and because the 2 games they actually won were like kind of clean. Well, they weren't clean games, but they were games where they won the game. You know what I mean? Like it didn't get
Yeah.
thrown to them. They won the game.
Okay, so I'll give you the floor a little bit more here. Who do you think are the biggest improvements that took this team from absolute pure garbage to, hey, this team actually has a chance?
Well, Santorin played like a real jungler for 2 of those games, and that could honestly simply be enough because one, Rich is still a super dominant force in the top lane. Jensen seems to be getting better and better every week.
For sure.
Last split even he was pretty horrible and didn't really see any improvement throughout the year. And especially after his week 1 where he looked still very horrible. I think people were starting to question whether or not this has been like a bit of a Jensen decline, but week 2,
Ye
he was sort of average, and I thought week 3 he was very good.
I, when it comes to Jensen, I think last split he had like definitely a downward trajectory, and this split it's going the other way. I think he's gotten so much better as the split has gone on, and specifically he's just playing comfort. He's going back to basics. Azir, Oriana, he's great on those champions. I think that put him on Azir, Oriana. Now you might say, hey, what if they ban Azir, Oriana, and maybe we'll have to wait and see what happens when they do that. But he still can play other stuff. We know he's a LeBlanc player, longtime LeBlanc. So like I'm sure he has other picks that he could play. But those two have been long time comfort for Jensen, and I think if Dignitas wants to continue to have success, I would be putting him on those two champions.
But I still believe that Rich and Tomo are still the beasts of this team. I mean, Rich had another good week, I thought. Really spiced things up with the Alawi pick. His KDA wasn't looking pretty, but he was doing a lot of work in terms of the pressure that he was absorbing around the map and just even the laning phase. Dokla was on the back foot from the jump. He was under his tower, getting the soul ripped out of him almost every single time, getting set to about 200 HP, having to base, having to lose waves, had to waste his TP early on. Not waste it, but burn it. So another good week from Rich. My best top in the LCS in my books through 3 weeks.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like Jensen's the reason this team's winning games. I do think that you could point to a lot of players. We mentioned how they team fight well. There's a lot of people that you could point to for doing that well. I do think Diamond is still the weak link on this team. He did have what was it? It was another Rakan play, I want to say, where he peeled really well for Tomo. I can't remember the specifics. He didn't have all, it wasn't all bad for Diamond, is what I'm trying to say. But I think he's still the guy that needs to step up the most for this to be like a complete roster across the board, as well as Santorin. Like you mentioned, Santorin had a really rough start to the split. So I guess I would look at jungle support for improvement out of this team, even if we've started to see a little bit out of both of them.
But I mean, the main thing I'm concerned about with this team is if the game is slow and there's no action early that's caused by your laners, laning well, it feels like this team doesn't know how to function in the early game.
Hmm.
Because in their one loss that they had, it was exactly that. It was a slow early game. Santorin, he was down in CS to jungle Scion. I don't even know how you do that. How you're down in CS to jungle Scion.
Yeah, that's a fair question to ask. Actually,
I
I
mean, they
don't
actually they
know.
actually won that game, but that was one of the examples of like the slow early game where nothing happens and Santorin's on the back foot. But
Yeah.
still, like,
Also,
come on.
it's also worth pointing out that yeah, they're 5-4, but I still don't think this team is above average or above 500 team. Like I definitely think that they are still one of the weaker teams. They have a hard time. Well, I guess we've said before that their team fighting is their best. They have a hard time laning and they fall behind a lot early, but even when they start to come back, like this team, you know what they're really good at? They die a lot when they're hitting the Nexus. They've had so many of their games where they're dying as they're killing the Nexus. And a lot of times they don't finish off the Nexus. They did one time. They barely finished off the Nexus in the one game. I can't remember who it was against, but there's been like two other of their games where they're trying to close out the game and they just can't.
They have that like G2 aspect to them where the game, like when they're trying to end, it just gets super hectic for some reason. Whether or not
Yeah.
that's them, hitting minions to try to improve CS or like wanting to go for extra kills or just pushing the limit of trying to end the game. Like, because in those instances where they try to hit the Nexus and either get it right at the end with teammates dying, it's like, well, everyone's got to commit to hitting the Nexus and we're getting our asses kicked by all these respawning guys. We're
Yeah.
Was it them in the who was it? Was it them against NRG where they like tried to end the game and
Yes.
they failed?
Baron.
Dude, yeah, that was funny, man.
NRG rushed the Baron and got back in time.
Yeah,
That's what I'm talking about.
I
That's
know.
where
Like
they're trying to kill the
we
Nexus.
almost saw Baron for Nexus trade.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like you got to give props to NRG for that because they need like when you're behind like that and you're gonna lose the game if you do nothing. You got to make something happen. I feel like that was NRG being like, guys, let's do something.
Yeah, but it's funny because if it didn't work out for them like that, they would have been memed to eternity. Just
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%. Who are we talking about next now?
well, I figured we kind of talk about C9 and EG kind of at the same time, just because
Okay.
these are our number 1 and 2 teams.
Yep.
Uh, Cloud9 did drop their game against Liquid earlier in the week to make it so now at the end of the first part of the round robin, Cloud and EG are tied at 7-2. But as we drew it up in our predictions last week, we were hoping that this was going to be for the undisputed first place spot. But 7-2 and 7-2, but Cloud9 does have that head to head edge, and I mean it was kind of a one sided stomp.
Yeah, I feel like if like so I feel like most people have C9 as the clear best team in the league because of how hard they stomped EG and they're the only two teams at the top of the standings. But just imagine if they didn't get so hard stomped by TL, how clear we would be saying C9 is winning it all, like no problem, they're winning the whole split. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They got they sprinted it in that game against Team Liquid. And
It's hard to I mean it's difficult to judge Cloud9 on that game because of how hard they were just running it down. Like they were doing as much as they could to try and die in terms of like really going over that line of like because when you play League of Legends, like there's that line of like, okay, I need to posture around the enemy, but I can't be too close to him because then they can engage on and hit me. But I need to be close enough to threaten that I'm going to engage on them. And they did not give a damn. They were just permanently going in.
yeah. And that game is pretty much between Blabber and Sven, who was trying to int more. And I guess I'll ask you the question, JNT. Who are you giving the int award to for int of the week for
Dude,
that particular game?
I know, like you look at the KDAs and Sven is 7 and Blabber has 5, but dude, Blabber was running it down, man. Because Blabber was the guy that was going in first, and Sven was trying to follow up these, straight up bad engages. Well, one of them, to be fair, was actually a good play. I forget who Blabber ulted on, but it was where he was in the river and he was ulting on somebody in mid, and the guy smartly flashed towards his mid tower and into the rest
Yeah.
of his team to kill off Blabber. But then Sven flashes in to follow it up when there is no follow up coming. And it's like he's the guy following up the enter. So does that really make him an enter? Even though he
It's
did play a bad early game and died in lane phase, but Blabber was the bigger enter in this situation here.
So what's funny is that I went in like before rewatching the games, I thought for sure it was just Sven, like hands down Sven biggest inter, no doubt about it. And then after rewatching the game, I was like, God, these guys are really both making a strong case for I want to lose this game. I think I still fall on the side of Sven was the bigger inter, but I'm glad you pointed out the just how bad of a game Blabber had to me as well because it made me pay attention more to his game against Team Liquid, and I was like, "Yep, that is quite the
When you
difference out
think
of what."
of Blabber, it feels like Vi would be his type of champion, but historically Vi is like one of his worst champions. Just for whatever reason, it just does not fit the Blabber playstyle. Maybe it's
Yeah,
because it
the
has like absolutely no escape. Because like all the other champions that he plays, kind of psycho, have some sort of escape. Like with Kindred, you got like the safety for the R. With Kha'Zix, you have like the invisibility and the jump resets potentially. And Lee Sin has a ton of mobility, but and I guess well, I mean Olaf doesn't, but Olaf's
Vi
kind of
also
like that.
doesn't. Yeah, Vi doesn't take the kills, right? Like Blabber usually wants to take over a game with
That's true.
Olaf or
Yeah.
Kindred, where he's the carry and he plays like a psycho. When you're
Yeah.
a psycho
It's a good
Vi,
point.
like everyone plays Vi like a psycho. You're going in. It's pretty.
Unless you're
So I
like
think
that
that's
fed to a point where you can build like Sunder or Triforce. But I mean, everybody goes
true.
Radiant Virtue, Black Cleaver, or some form of tank.
And a lot of the times Vi just doesn't get the kill. Vi is just the engage regardless of what build she's going. I mean, sometimes I guess she might get kills, but usually you're giving that to your Aphelios, or a lot of times it's paired with Ari and Ari will pick up the kill and whatever.
I think the only
But
time that I've really seen a guy going Giga Chat on Vi and building like Sunder or Triforce is Inspired. So
and then on the flip side, we wanted to talk about the C9 EG game specifically. That was just not what that game was supposed to be. I predicted EG in that one when we were doing our predictions, thinking like, yeah, I could see EG coming out on top. I was like, I'll take the underdog, haha, and I feel like an idiot.
yeah, Jojo, dude, Jojo was playing like a psychopath in lane phase. It was great. That guy played
Here's
like
the
the
thing though.
jungler did not exist.
But here's the thing though, like we say all the time, you want JoJo playing like he's a crackhead. That's peak JoJo. The problem is JoJo was sharing his crack with his bot lane this game. His bo his bot lane was freaking sprinting it. And you also gotta give props to Cloud9 for capitalizing on diving bot over and over and over again. Like, once they got a lead, they continued to push that lead, and the game just ended through bot lane. They took all the plates, they got Berserker up 1,000,000 gold, even Blabber was getting killed. So, yeah, JoJo can't share his crack with Unforgiven. That's the rule, and Ayla.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really faulting EG too much. I mean, I'm not faulting their bot lane too much for chain dying, because you got to give a lot of the credit to Cloud9 for the fantastic dives that they had. I mean, the two bot lane tower dives that they had early in the game were almost perfect. They just Blabber got a little bit unlucky where he must have forgot that he had red buff on the first dive, and red buff was ticking, so he walked back into range and he was thinking that he wasn't going to draw tower shots, but red buff caught him, so the tower insta forced onto him. But maybe they played the level one bad. Like, if you want to criticize them, like the lane manipulation level one, maybe they played it bad, and that's why they got that wave stacked on them. That's what I can say was the bad parts for EG there. But Cloud9 really just snowballed the game out of control. I mean, when you have a 1,500 goal lead at like 4 to 5 minutes into the game, or maybe it was just slightly after that because it was the second time they dove bot, so maybe it was like 6 or 7 minutes. But when the goal lead is 1.52k that early, and then you just take every single objective on the map, it's so rare that the enemy team ever wins the game unless there's a massive throw.
That's a game that EG wants back. They really want that one back because I mean, yeah, if they even just have a close game with Cloud9, people are putting them up in the same kind of tier as Cloud9. But I think after the results, I think it's very clear that Cloud9 is by themselves at the top of the tier. Like, yes, they're sharing a spot in standings with EG, but as far as tier list goes, I think everyone has Cloud9 far and above, especially after a huge stomp like that.
But I don't
Now,
think it necessarily knocked down EG. I think it just reaffirmed to everybody that Cloud9 was good and is good.
yeah, I could see that. The thing is, I'm still not completely sold that EG is a top tier team. I'm just sold that they're a good team. Like,
I'm
before the season started, I think I had them power ranked like 6 or something like that. So I had them middle of the pack. I no longer think that. I definitely think that they're one of the better teams. I'm not convinced that they're the second best team. I think them Golden Guardians will kind of fight for it, but I don't think either one of them personally. I don't think either one of them is actually close to Cloud9.
I think at this point in the season, considering their record, I think 4 is really the floor for them. I think they're going to be in the top 4.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah. Anything else on EG?
Um, I mean, Armao doesn't look as good, but he's less hitting a bunch of people with Viego. That's all I'm saying. Everybody's
Oh
saying
my
this guy
god.
is like second best jungler in the league, but
Okay, here's the thing. I know that you said last week that like you think that the EG's performance was like where the wins were coming from was like 70% JoJo and 30%
and I still
um
do.
Armao. For me, I feel like that is just such an injustice to what Armao is bringing to
I
that team. I
and
have
I'm
no
trying. I'm not
problem.
trying to make it an injustice on him.
Hold
I'm
on,
just
hold
saying
on.
JoJo's the goat.
I have no problem with saying that JoJo is the MVP of this team and that he is the reason they're winning a little bit more than Armeo. I just think we're completely with that. I think we're completely looking over what Armeo is bringing to this team. I think they work very well together, and I think one of the reasons JoJo can go back to playing like a psycho is his jungle proximity. Apparently, on the desk this week, they're saying that he's got the best jungle proximity in the league. So it's like for JoJo to be able to play
You
like
mean,
the
well, the
crackhead.
highest. I mean, I would assume
What
the
did I
best.
say?
Well, you said the best, but I would assume the best is
Oh,
the highest.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't
And so
know.
like
I didn't
that's
know if you were
something.
trying to use that, like, oh, JoJo actually has really low jungle proximity and he's still beasting. So like that's. I didn't know
Yeah,
exactly what you were trying to
that's a
prove with that.
good clarification. Yeah, no, I mean highest. Yeah, thank you. And I think that's worth pointing out as well because I think they just play really well together. And so I don't want to. I'm not trying to take away from JoJo. I think let's just not forget that Armeo is a big part of this jungle mid duo that is kind of taking over their wins.
Yeah.
Who's next?
Golden Guardians, they're just a smidgen below Cloud9 and EG, sitting at 6-3. You know, they could have had an extra win this week potentially. Blue Jays a
Should
bit
have.
upset about that, but
Yeah,
2-1 is still good.
they do have some issues, so I don't want to shy away from that. I have them winning 12 still. I still have them going 12-6. And I believe you had them going 10-8. And I think people will be like, well, 2 wins, what's the big deal? That's not that much. I think that is a fairly significant difference. And so what I wanted to do with the conversation around Golden Guardians is kind of talk about the reasons that you either should or reasons why you should not have faith in Golden Guardians. And I think one of the reasons that, well, I guess there's a few reasons why you should. Um, I'll start with Licorice. We've continued to see his really good performance carry over into summer. Mind you, his first game of the week was bad. Which one was that? You got hard camp. Was that NRG? I think it was
Um,
the NRG one because contracts kept going top with Ivern, I think it was.
yes, yes.
So the positives here is that Licorice will play super aggro and he will take over a lane. The negative is that teams are starting to catch on. We saw 100 Thieves go top a lot. We saw NRG go top a lot. So there is some counterplay to what Golden Guardians is doing. Even though I think it works in almost all of their games, sometimes you will get caught and eventually you will have to adapt your playstyle. You can't stick with one thing. So I think the argument around Licorice, just him altogether, is the positives are he will take over a lane. His CSD numbers are through the roof this split. He's doing a really good job. He's taking plates. He's kind of being a monster. The down part is people are catching on and you can't do the same thing forever.
Yeah, I think the way that Golden Guardians is, I wouldn't say they've completely shifted their identity, but the way that they've changed their identity is they're taking more of River's time and resources and putting that into Licorice. And I think the Golden Guardians early game has had a bit of a there's been a bit of a ripple effect on the rest of the lanes and what happens in the early game because you've talked about this for the last 3 weeks now, ever since the season started, that 6A and Huhi have not been a good laning bot lane. You know, they've
Hmm.
still been really great in team fights. I think if you want to talk about one of the best things about Golden Guardians is their team fighting. Their team fighting is fantastic, especially when you have Huhi on an engager and you got Stixay on some form of a hyper carry. They look great. But the early game for Golden Guardians was their strength in the spring split and is now a little bit of a weakness. And I think part of that is because River is more on this utility and more of a facilitator than the reason and sort of the motor in the early game.
What's kind of funny to me, so after the games this week when they were talking about player of the week, when they do like the, I don't even remember what it's called anymore, if it's called like LCS cooldown or whatever, it was just like a 5 minute segment of like going over the standings, blah blah blah, player of the week, all that crap. And Mark Z was kind of putting up an argument for Stixay that he should have got player of the week. And so I went, oh, I didn't even consider that, let me pay attention to Stixay as I rewatch the game. So I'm rewatching the games. Game one, his Tristana, I feel like he has the perfect opportunity to go reset, reset, reset on Tristana, and he jumps out. And you could even hear it in Rafa's
Oh
casting.
yeah.
He's like, "Oh, he jumped out,"
I
and
remember that.
I was like, "Noob, what are you doing, man?" And I was like, "Mark Z wanted this guy to be Player of the Week." And then the next two games, Stixay had huge pop off fights that were like game winning fights, and I was like, "Oh, okay." This is why Mark Z said that Stixay should have got Player of the Week. And so again, I'm torn with like games 2 and 3 this week, you got to have faith in Golden Guardians. Game one, I'm like, oh, their AD carry is not very good. So it's like you're getting very different things game to game. And I think like it's really hard to pinpoint what to think of Golden Guardians when you're seeing such drastic differences from game to game.
They're the complete opposite of what they were exactly 1 year ago, where in summer of last year, they were really good in the early game, but they would always throw all their leads. But now it feels like
Mm,
they're sort of the opposite, where they're not as good in the early game, but their team fighting and their objective fighting is up tier.
I see.
To me,
I
at least,
see.
dude, their team fighting might be the best in the league, I think.
Interesting. Let me think about that.
And
Because
maybe
Cloud9
that's
fights pretty
because,
well.
well, I wonder if that's just because we haven't really seen Cloud9 in true late game scenarios at all this split.
Cloud9's always ahead too, or
Well,
at least it
because
feels like they are.
they just end the game before 26, 27 minutes before the second Baron or a meaningful Dragon Soul actually spawns. Because when it comes to Dragon Soul with Cloud9, they're either not caring about it and just care about Rift Heralds and then just win the game through that, or they're just getting the quick soul at like 22, 23 minutes or something.
It's funny because
So we
it's
don't even get to see
possible
them.
it's possible that Cloud9 is the best team fighting team, but we're like, it's not them because they clean out their game so, or they finish their game so cleanly. You know, it's like,
We can't
yeah,
give an accurate represent or an accurate score.
I can definitely agree that I would put Golden Guardians up there as far as their team fighting is concerned. I think their team fighting is probably one of their best components. Last thing I'll say on them is I think Gory's got to step it up a little bit. He's kind of getting picked off in side lanes. Not something that I would have expected to say out of Gory. There's a few times where the enemy's just not showing and he's pushing up in side lanes. It's like, dude, this is just classic lane assignments. Like, I feel like that's something you see out of rookies a lot, not out of like Gory. And he got caught a couple of times this week, so I'm counting on him to improve. Also, he also got picked off against contracts. That wasn't even in a side lane. That was just the throw that lost
Oh
that game.
yeah.
Stixay's doing Elder, and he's like, I could see how he didn't think he's on a ward, but you still see Ivern walking towards you. Don't get caught, forehead. Your 80 carries soloing Elder. Feels bad, man. Gory will bounce back next week. He'll bounce back.
All good. We got Team Liquid up next. They're kind of the reverse Cloud9 for me this week because they went out and stomped Cloud9 and looked really, really good in that game. But in their other two games, they were pretty bad, I thought. In that, I don't even know if I want to call it a banger, the TL versus FlyQuest banger, because it was like a long game, which kind of makes it a banger, but it was just so slow and deathless that I don't know if I'd consider it a banger. But
They choked a little bit. I don't know if
their
choke's the right word. They didn't play well. I will say that. I
their
don't think they.
their team fighting was horrid in that game, and maybe it just was because they had no damage on their team comp, so it just felt like their team fighting was bad. But they just couldn't like CC properly. They couldn't position properly with their engage and whatnot, and I don't know. It just felt like a really bad game for me.
I'm not convinced that Team Liquid knows what Poppy does. I think like there was the one time where it was Summit that stood right next to a wall and just let Poppy pin him into the wall and died for free. That was around Rift Herald, and then Yon twice. Twice. One was where was the first one? I can't remember, but one of them was around Dragon as well. He's just hitting the Dragon for free and lets Poppy walk up and stun him into the wall. But it happened twice with Yon, and I'm like, dude, like you're just wasting your cleanse. Poppy stuns him, and of course he has to cleanse, and then insta flash Tibbers on him right after, and now he has no cleanse and he's dead. Like Yon, bro, there's a Poppy there. You could see him. He's on a ward. Stop walking up.
Yeah, the thing that it's so weird watching like North American teams when they play Vi Ari, it just looks so much worse than the rest of the world because for whatever reason they can't time their CCs well. Like I see all the time in NA and Team TL did this a bunch in their game against FlyQuest. Maybe it was just because the enemy team had a bunch of tenacity, but Harry was so slow on following up the Vi ult with Everfrost or Charm. There was like 2 or 3 separate occasions where the enemy just got out with before the CC chain was able to land. And I don't know, you chalked that up to poor communication. You don't know when Piotric's going in or the follow-up's not there, but
Do you remember the
it's
one against Stixay? Again, like the last team fight against Stixay where he hourglassed it or stopwatched it?
um no, I mean I don't remember that exactly, but
The Vi ult. So this was the very last team fight in the Golden Guardians game. Vi goes to ulti Stixay. I think he's playing Aphelios. Stixay uses stopwatch. Coming out of the stopwatch, he gale forces away from the Everfrost. Fine, but then he's point blank charm and misses the charm,
oh,
and
okay, yeah, I remember
now they've
that.
got nothing left, and Stixay just kills both of them after that. It was like,
Yeah.
dude, like you can't miss everything. Well played to Stixay. I'll give credit there, but like point blank charm, you got to hit that.
Yeah, but
And
Team Liquid plays these very high execution comps, and I feel like it sometimes they just make it more difficult on themselves to win some of these games where you're playing these early game snowballing team comps that really fall off in the mid and late game, and the early game doesn't work out the way that they want it to, or they don't get enough of a lead. Because they had a lead in this game against FlyQuest. They had probably a 2-3K gold lead for the first 10 to 20 minutes of the game, and I don't know if they had the 2 first early drags, but no, they didn't.
how are we feeling about Team Liquid now? Because I'll just remind people, they started off 4-0, and then they're 1-4 in their last 5. And I'll remind people that their first 4 games were against TSM, 100 Thieves, Immortals, and NRG. Like teams that are bad right now.
Yeah, all teams in the bottom half of the standings. They have not beaten a quote unquote top team.
And the theme that we've gone with TL is like, let's compare them to last split, because last split they really underperformed. And it feels like as every week goes on, we started off with like, yep, they're better than last split, and then that last week we're like, well, they're a little bit better than last split, and this week I'm like, they're a tiny bit better than last split, and if they have another bad week, I'm just calling them the same old thing.
I just really think that they could benefit themselves from playing easier to play like team compositions. And I know that that can be maybe a people might use that as an argument. Well, like, oh, if you're just playing easy to execute comps, like you're not going to be that good of a team when it comes time to executing a good comp. And maybe that's true, maybe that's the case, but they really are pigeonholing themselves in a lot of these games where
There
they're
was a lot of criticism for the FlyQuest draft where they just had Ash as damage and they didn't have
yeah, that
enough
was
damage.
horrible. They dude,
Yeah.
they slammed I don't know that what they slammed like Renekton Vi like 1-2 like and then they picked Ari on 3 so like you have no damage in your top side and then you lock in Ash 80 carry. You 1-2 3'd no damage and then you picked Ash.
So I definitely agree that the draft was like not optimal and that they were low on damage, but there were other reasons why they lost that game too. I'm not going to go into all of them. One of them mainly to me, I thought Jan played really scared. And I understand it's not easy to walk up as Ash. I get that. Cuz you don't really have like
And
any.
don't build Triforce. That's the other thing.
Sure, I don't have any opinion on that. I just think the one
Well,
time he
they needed
had like
damage.
the one time they were cleaning up the fight, or they should have been able to clean up the fight, and he had the slow on, I think it was against a Poppy. Yeah, it was impact on Poppy. He easily could have run him down, and I don't know who he was afraid of because he had just had the feathers pulled back on him by Zaya, and Zaya was a mile away. So like there's no Zaya's not going to come up and hit you. There's no more feathers for her to pull on you. Like there was no more threat. You're surrounded by all your teammates. They could have easily run down the Poppy. Because he didn't, Poppy ends up being able to base, TPs and flank someone and picks up a kill, and then they siege with Baron. And I'm like, this all doesn't happen if Jan just runs up because he's already ghosted and just kills the Poppy. It was free. And so I guess I've been going off on Jan quite a bit this episode. I guess it's clear to say that I was a little disappointed with his performance this week.
Yeah, not the greatest week for TL, and as you mentioned, kind of getting worse and worse as the split's gone on. But I don't think that means that like I don't think their players are playing any worse. I mean, the only one who's not as effective it seems is Pioshik, and I think that's because their early game just hasn't been as dominant as it was at the start of the split. But I still think that this team is maybe I don't think I predict them to be top 3. I don't know if I put them top 3. I think I'd still put them in the top 6, top 5.
Yeah, which is still an improvement over last split. It's just still not what this team's supposed to live up
Yeah,
to.
not
Like,
enough.
yeah. So I'm not doubting them completely yet. They did hard stomp Cloud9. Let's remind people of that. It's just when you start 4-0 and you end the first round robin 5-4, people are going to start to ask questions if you were only 4-0 because you played all the other teams that were at the bottom of the standings.
But to be fair, you need to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat, and if we're calling those teams bad teams, then those are the games you need to win. If they turn
Yep.
out to be the clutch gaming of this split, where they beat everybody below them and then lose to everybody above them, that only gets you 6 at best.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. 100 Thieves.
A 2-1 week for them. Definitely some improvements. Quid did play better, but he still didn't play that great. But
He
still an
still
improvement.
dies. He dies at times where you just can't be
He
dying there, and
makes a
he's trying
lot of
to.
mistakes still. He definitely
He
got a
gets.
bit too hyphy, especially in that Golden Guardians game. I thought for me, that was 100 Thieves' game to win.
Yeah.
And a litany of mistakes, from the entire team in that game specifically, but especially from Quid towards the later stages, meant that they lost that game. But I think they they were running for a decent 3-0, so I'm not sold on them yet because they're not looking very clean overall, even in their wins. But at least they're winning. At least they won more games than they won the last 2 weeks.
They miss Bjergsen. They won't admit it, but they miss Bjergsen.
It
Double F
will
writes
it,
a
it
love letter
will
every night.
it will really be interesting to hear more of that dynamic if it ever comes out because feels like that's something that has not really been talked about at all. But when you look at their mid lane performances over the year so far, a better mid laner would greatly assist this team.
It definitely would, and I don't wanna make it sound like we've given up on Quid yet. He still only played 2 weeks of LCS. Like, we the first thing that we saw after week 1 was everyone reminded, like, "Hey, remember when Jensen first came into the LCS?" Which is a fair point. Not everyone starts off their career in the
MNS as
LCS
well.
looking great. MNS, sure. There's lots of players I'm sure that we could go with. So when I'm saying they miss Bjergsen, I am sort of tongue in cheek. However, it's funny because there seemed to be so much flame being thrown at Bjergsen throughout not even just this spring that just happened, even last year on TL, it was like, oh, Bjergsen's not that good. Bjergsen's bad. And it was like, okay, we can all acknowledge that he's not the GOAT Bjerg, but like he was good. And now you have a mid laner that's clearly struggling. And yes, again, that could change, but it's very, very clear that mid lane, I think, is their biggest issue. And so that's where all the eyes are going to be drawn when you have a brand new player and you're seeing that player struggle.
Yeah. The other person that I thought actually had a much improved week. I shouldn't say much improved, but had a better week was Someday.
Someday, yeah.
Had a pretty fat carry uh game against who was it? Dignitas.
Yeah,
Didn't
he
fare
solo
as
killed
well in the
Rich.
game against Golden Guardians, but
Solo killed the Hots of the Faker of Hots.
does that make him the faker Hifhots?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Someday is officially the Faker of Hots until Rich comes back and solo kills Someday.
nice. We can pass the invisible belt around for the rest of the split if we feel
Yeah.
if we feel the need.
Yeah. Uh, I think Bjergsen. I think Doublelift's still playing well. There was the one team fight around Dragon though that I didn't know what the fuck he was doing when he's standing on the other side of the wall. You could clearly tell not everyone on the team is on the same page. That was the one area where I'm like, "Hey, Doublelift, your character's not moving, bro. You're just standing still." I don't know what's going on with that fight. Other than that, I mean, he completely shit on Wild Turtle. As I guess that's kind of expected to happen, but to me, that's like that's how they won that game was they just started snowballing bot. I think Doublelift is still their best player. I don't think that's any hot take.
Through 9
But I
games, Double F and Boosie are clearly the best part of this team by far and away.
definitely agree. And I guess that's all to say. At least it's not totally doomed. You have success somewhere on the map, even if they're still making mistakes. They still have an area where they can reliably expect to get some gold lead.
Well, I was about to oh, man, I was about to say I had a phrase in my head. I had it, but I just lost it. But I was going to say something about inconsistency because inconsistency that's what NRG is right now.
I do have one more thing that I want to say about 100 Thieves before we move on to NRG. You ever notice that this team just runs to Baron?
It's been
Like
happening a lot with a lot of teams these days.
I guess the one of the biggest issues with 100 Thieves right now is like I guess maybe it's a solution. It's that they find ways to win games when they're from behind, but you can't reliably just like hope to flip every game and make it into playoffs and then go on a playoff run. A lot of their games are like, guys, we're behind. Hey, you guys just want to out rotate them and rush Baron and flip it? Yep. And then they do that and they get back into games, which is like, okay, good to whoever's making the macro calls on the team, but that can't keep happening. That you are not going to continue to win very many games if that's your win condition.
I
So that's the
guarantee
last thing I'll
you
say
I
on
guarantee
100.
you that's a double lift thing because one of the things that 100 Thieves actually does very poorly is like their side lane management. That was especially apparent in the loss against Golden Guardians. Like if they would have probably been able to properly manage their side waves and actually do something that wasn't inting in terms of a macro sense, they probably would have been able to win that game. And I think Double F's just kind of at the point where like he realizes that the side lanes are just fucked. So he's like, we just got to go Baron. Like we got to fight them and win.
Yeah, for our listeners, if you're watching a 100 Thieves game and they're losing like 2-3K, you keep an eye on that Baron pit because 100 Thieves is going there. That's my prediction. Okay, sorry, we can go NRG now.
Yeah, that you can take the C. Wait, oh Jesus, I had it, but I just lost it again.
I
Oh
know what you're
man,
trying
this
to say.
is
It's
it's
okay,
so
JT.
doomed. I've
You
screwed
don't
it
need to
up.
say
I feel
it.
bad.
You don't need to say it
I'm
because
gonna
we
go
all know
die.
what you're trying to say right now. I don't want to try to butcher it myself, but basically they're still CLG.
Yep,
That's
yep.
yes. Don't worry, JT. We got you. We are there telepathically.
Oh my god.
Uh yeah. I like what the hell? They beat Golden Guardians, they beat Cloud9, and they're losing almost everybody else. Who else did they beat? Somebody else bad,
I'm gonna
maybe?
assume it was Immortals because I don't think that energy. I think Immortals wins were Dignitas and
They beat 100 Thieves. Didn't
Energy
Immortals
did?
come back 10K against them? Wasn't that the
Oh
10K
yeah, that
throw?
was that game. Oh my god, actually.
Imagine throwing a 10K lead to Immortals.
Oh, actually hilarious.
Oh, I don't know what to think about NRG. They literally are CLG, first of all.
They were
Um,
the game to game performances are just wild. I really don't know what to make of it. Dokla can actually look like a competent player who lanes well and does well from a split push and macro standpoint. And in other games, he dies every single lane in the lane phase. He gets caught out of position in side lanes. He doesn't know how to like. He's either too far forward or too far back in team fights, so he's either just dying too early or being completely useless. It is night and day.
Also, all the talk is about their bot lane, and by the way, fairly so, because their bot lane, we keep saying it, I'm going to say it again, they're not living up to the expectation that we had for them. However, the bot lane is this illusion where everyone, or not even an illusion, it's just a distraction. Everyone's looking at the bot lane being like, how come their bot lane isn't better? Fair. But everywhere else looks worse too.
I
And I
thought
don't
the
think
best part
contracts
of
look.
their performance this week was their bot lane.
Maybe. My point was going to be that not that I think Contracts is terrible, but I don't think Contracts is as good as he was last split. I think Palafox is definitely worse than he was last split. And I think Dokla, well, I wasn't exactly the biggest Dokla believer last split. I think Dokla's still kind of struggling where like he has some good laning phase and then sometimes he runs it down as you mentioned. So to me, I think that part stayed consistent. But all this to say, I think their bot lane's getting a lot of flack, which even if that's fair, that needs to be spread out across the team. Everyone is disappointing as far as what I would expect out of them.
It's funny because their bot lane is just consistently average, whereas the rest of the team is either really good or really bad.
Ignar had one nice rel engage, if I remember, a couple nice blitzcrank hooks, but I think he had a couple of whiffs as well. Not on the blitzcrank, but on the rel. I think the one rel ulti was like just a complete whiff. The other one got like one guy. Like not the rel ultis that I kind of want to see out of Ignar. Wait, I guess what I'm thinking
But I
now
do
with
want to see
Ignar,
more Ignar Rel because I still think that
yeah,
Rel's really good.
you want Ignar to be that guy that the go button Ignar, even if he hasn't been. I still think that's what you want to try to get out of him. I just think it's time for me to put that aside where I'm no longer waiting for it. Like that's the way I've talked about Ignar for years in this league. And I mentioned earlier how Chime has become Ignar. Chime, you are now Ignar. Ignar, you are not Ignar. Until it happens again, right? Until he actually starts getting off these team fight winning engages. We're not seeing they're few and far between the ones that you do see, and so I'm not holding my breath for it anymore. You know what kind of makes me think of?
I
Kind of makes me
gotta.
think of. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I got a good comparison for you.
Uh
Ignar's
huh.
like he's like in his someday phase where
Oh, I was gonna go with licorice.
I guess that works as
Whereas
well.
like
Same
licorice
kind of
just
thing.
disappeared for 2 years and then came back until he comes back, he's no longer Ignar. I'm not holding my breath anymore.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean he can't do it. It just means it's been too long since he's been doing it. That's all.
Even though I despise Alistar, he's the one guy who I can say like go play some Alistar.
What about Vulcan?
Yeah, okay, yeah, him as well. But I don't want to. I don't want to see that change. I mean, unless we're going back to full tank meta, like because you actually can't play Alistar when it's full tank meta. But when
How
Silas is in the meta, you cannot pick Alistar. It's illegal.
how delusional am I, J&T, if I still think this team is a top half team in the league?
I think you're pretty delusional.
This would be the perfect time for them to go 3-0.
Honestly,
Like
it
it
would.
would, right? Like it absolutely would. I don't even know who they're playing. Even if it's Cloud9, like it would be the perfect time for them to like they're CLG. I'm telling you, I'm not even gonna say that I'm predicting them to go 3-0. I'm not. You can't predict what this team is going to do. That's what makes them CLG. You just wait though. I
And
think they're better. I think they're better than how they're performing.
then last but not least, we got Immortals. They what what can we say about this team? I want to say that Balulu, I think, needs to stop getting put on Annie duty, and we need to put the game in his hands a little bit because we need something different going on with this team. We cannot be running back the same. We're gonna draft around. We're we're gonna play utility jungler, setup mid laner, and hyper carry for tactical. It's not working. We need something else.
Just fuck it, Vel'Koz.
Honestly, Vel'Koz, Zoe. I know LeBlanc's banned every game, but maybe that'll change when the static shiv nerfs come, or I guess when they start playing on patch 13.13, which is static shiv nerfs.
I
I need
bet
I
you
need something new. I need
for
something new.
immortals coaches, it's probably the most annoying team to have to coach and then listen to the community, because it's always with immortals that are always like, why don't you play this, why don't you play that, which is like such like the fan reaction, but like it doesn't change how I feel even a little bit. I'm like, no, I want to see Vel'Koz, that's it. I want to see Kenvi play Kindred, fuck Sejuani, play this, play this, play that.
Dude, maybe they need to go the power of evil way and just you play what you play, and that's about it. Like Kenvi has been getting put on tanks the entirety of his LCS existence, and everybody's been preaching for the last year that this guy is known as a carry player. Like, let him get a couple of games on a carry. Let's just see what it looks like, because what we're seeing right now is absolute dog.
Yeah. Even Tactical had a good start to the split, and he still looks
He did.
pretty bad now.
He
Like,
looked he beasted out in the first two games. He was the reason they won those games. Him and Treats, and then they have just
I just,
fallen off a cliff.
I just had this thought. I bet you'll remember. Do you remember when we had Cubby on that episode? What he said about TSM last split?
No, I
Do
don't.
you recall? He said, "I just don't know who's going to win a game for them." You remember that?
Yeah, this applies to
It does,
Immortals right
doesn't it?
now. Well,
Like
I
if
mean, unless
Tactical,
Balulu's
if
on Belkaz or something.
he played one Vel'Koz game, and that game was pretty much over before it. Like that was, they got hard
Yeah, yeah.
smoked
I
in
mean
that one.
that doesn't count.
Um,
Plus, I
yeah, like
also remember he was like two separate occasions. He was one damage off kills. I remember talking about that. Like, you give Belgaz a kill,
yeah.
and we're rolling.
That's true. I do remember that now. The other thing though is that like even though yes, Balulu's not playing the champion we want him to play, and Kenvy's not playing the champions we want him to play, they still look terrible. Like he just face checked an Alistar as Ari and dies. He
Oh, that
walked
was
up right
so
on
funny.
top of
Well,
Alistar and gets pulled. Like that doesn't matter what champion you're playing, man. That was bad.
I don't know exactly how, because I haven't played or played with a lot of Ivern, so I don't know what happens to the vision. Because I think that it could have been the case where he spawned a bush in between the pixel brush and the dragon wall, and I don't know if spawning a bush there immediately cuts off all the vision behind those bushes. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Wasn't
you
Vulcan
understand what I'm
in the
talking about?
bush though?
No, he was walking behind that, and then Ivern spawned a bush, and then he walked into the bush. So I
Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it works like any other bush. Like I think it's just a bush.
Yeah. Well, I just don't know if it was a case where maybe it somehow caused it to like block vision or anything like that. So I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but just a thought, because it
And
did look extremely bizarre. And I mean, we want to talk about bizarre. That Immortals versus FlyQuest game. If you told me that that there was going to be a controversy about like match fixing with this game, I would be like, yes, match fixing happened in this game, because there was some absolute like trolling that I saw in that game. Even Jat was calling it out, like, this is just weird what is happening. Like, he didn't even know how to explain it. He was just like, what's going on is really weird. Like, what is happening? The top laner is not listening to the jungler, and like, dude,
Okay,
what?
just to be clear, we're not actually accusing anyone. I know you're not. Let's just
But I
make
wouldn't be
that clear.
surprised at all if it was revealed that there was match fixing going on in that game.
Bo plays in the LEC, or at least he used to. That is not happening in the LCS. Knock on wood. Yeah, they're bad. Okay, so I think we can leave it there. Even solo looks a lot worse, but I don't want to get. We don't need to.
Yeah.
There's always one team every split that it gets a little bit tiresome to talk about. A lot of the times it's Immortals. It used to be CLG.
Yeah, it was kind of split between. It used to be split between Golden Guardians, Dignitas, Immortals, and CLG, and Golden Guardians has kind of escaped that now over the last year, and Dignitas has temporarily escaped it, and NRG/CLG kind of escaped it last split, but Immortals has not escaped it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a rough 9 more games.
Yep, I think it will. Oh,
Because
actually, one thing we were still supposed to talk about with them is their losing streak, because they've lost 7 in a row,
yeah, they won
and
the first 2 games. Tactical
their
played well.
next Their next game is against TSM, which is their most winnable one. After that, they have Team Liquid, Cloud9, 100 Thieves, Golden Guardians, and then Dig is maybe their next winnable one after that. I suppose they could beat 100 Thieves. I just don't see it happening.
So
I don't
either
I
the
don't see them
losing
beating any of
streak,
those teams.
so either
Yeah.
the losing streak ends at 7, or it will extend to at the most, at the next winnable game 13 potentially.
We think, right? Like
Yeah,
you never know. TL could
could
even
throw. TL could
C9 could
throw.
suddenly like teams suddenly just do crazy shit. Maybe Cloud9 decides they want to try a bunch of random crap against a bad team and they throw. Who knows? But
Yeah.
I feel like if they don't beat TSM, which I don't think they will, I think they're in for a
Oh, don't
long losing
spoil
streak.
the future segment of the show, dude. Come
Well,
on.
I'm spoiling the predictions.
How could you do that?
Okay, just as a quick little wrap up of all the teams that we've gone over, I just wanted to ask you, out of all the teams with their record, JNT, I want to know which one you think is like furthest skill level away from what their record actually says.
Well, do you want the obvious answer or do you want the more creative answer that I've
I don't even think
uh,
any of them are that obvious. So you feed
okay,
me what your obvious one is.
Dignitas,
Okay.
because I would have to say that they're probably more likely around 2 to 3 wins right now as opposed to 5.
Yeah. Okay. Dignitas is the obvious
But if
one.
you
I
want
should.
my
Yeah.
if you want my maybe potentially spicy take. I mean, it's not a take per se, but my team. I pick 100 Thieves actually.
Interesting. I thought you were gonna go FlyQuest.
More because I refuse to believe that this streak of closer being useless is going to continue.
Hmm.
The switch what the switch will flip at some point.
Okay.
He'll
So if,
get a Lee Sin game or a Viego game or maybe who knows, maybe a Kindred game or something, and it'll switch and this guy's gonna go back to being God mode.
okay. So if they're
And I
four
think
and
Quid will
five
get a
right
bit better,
now,
obviously. So
if they're 4-5 right now, that's their current record. What do you think the record should be, or what do you think it will be at the end of the split?
I think they'll finish inside the top 4. So I'd probably put them around the 10 plus win margin, somewhere around
10
there.
and 8. So you think they're going to go 6-3 in their next half?
Yeah,
I am not that much of a believer in them. I'd probably put them around the 4-5 that they are. Honestly, I could
just
see them
think
going 8-10.
individually, I think this team is just too good to not be at the very least fourth.
Okay, my picks. I got two of them. One was Dignitas. I don't know if I would say it was super obvious, but I guess it was actually because I don't think they're above 500. Right? They're 5-4. They're not an above 500 team, not in my opinion.
Like a nice guess because I know what you're gonna say.
Go for it.
Energy.
Yes, I think energy. I kind of hinted at that a little bit earlier, right?
Well, and
I
last
think.
week.
Oh, did I?
Well, I don't know. You're coping a little bit.
Mm. What did I don't remember what I said. How did I cope? Do you
It
remember?
was it wasn't just more that you thought it was just more that because we had the 3 teams that were grouped at 2 and 4, and you're like NRG is way better than these two shitters, and then
Yeah. I'm not
yeah,
saying I wasn't coping. I probably was. I just don't remember what I would have said. Yeah, I like to cope on this podcast. Yeah, Cloud9, NRG rather, they're going to be a top 14 by the end of the split. What's their current record? They are 3 and
3 and
6.
6.
That means they got to
They've gone
climb.
have
Oh,
they
they
got
only got to climb 2 wins to catch Dig, and Dig's going to fall off.
they've
So
gone 1 and 2 every single week, which is pretty not great.
yeah,
I think they've gone 1 and 2 every week at least.
they'll finish 9-9. I got them going 6-3 in the second half.
What?
9-9. Yep,
So who
you
are
heard it. You heard it here first.
so what? They're only gonna lose to like Cloud9, Golden Guardians, and one other
Bro, you
team.
forgot their CLG. They're gonna beat Cloud9. Don't forget.
Sorry, yeah, this is true. This is true. I mean, they beat them in the first half of the split, so
And Golden Guardians.
once again, this is true.
Yeah. Okay. What's next? Are we doing the predictions and then
Yep.
quick news, or are we doing quick news and then predictions?
That was just a one-off.
Okay.
That was just because you gave me freedom of choice.
I'd love to give you freedom of choice. You're running the show.
Oh, we got the predictions on screen. I have dropped behind 1 game to Blue Jay. Because we were
You were
tied at
already one behind last
no,
week.
we were tied last week. Wait, weren't we?
Nope. I was 16-14. You were 15-15.
Oh, okay, never mind. Then it's still the same. I'm 1 game
Hmm.
behind.
Which, by the way, I want to point out our records aren't exactly that great.
Yeah, I think we have both gone. I think I went 7-8, 7-8, and 8-7, and you've gone 8-7, 7-8, 8-7 across each week. So we're basically like 500 on the predictions every single week, and there's a lot of upsets going on in the first half. But
I remember
usually
it
more
was
upsets happen in the first half of the round robin than the second half, I would say.
in either the first or second split that we were doing this. I remember we were kind of keeping track with what like the LCS analysts were doing in their predictions, and we were fucking killing them, Jinter. We were destroying them. I feel like I don't know what their numbers are now. I feel like they're
We're doing
probably
worse this
smashing
time.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe there's just so many upsets that it's hard to know, right?
Well, to be
Maybe it's
fair,
like
I mean,
FlyQuest starting oh 06.
FlyQuest probably has a lot to do with that, and EG as
Dig,
well, probably. Yeah,
dig.
EG, Dig, and FlyQuest, I think, are probably the biggest culprits of record predictions being lower potentially.
Okay, let's do these things. Take it away. I'll let you run
Well,
it this time.
we've already spoiled the first one, so we should just move on to the second one because I'm also going to pick TSM.
TSM.
100 Thieves versus FlyQuest. Wow, this is one of those games where I kind of want both of these teams to win because I'm expecting some upward trajectory here, but I
Oh
think
god,
I'm
this
gonna
one's
go with
hard.
FlyQuest because I think Vikla is playing better than Quid. That's my one and only reasoning for picking FlyQuest. They're both
I'm
bad,
gonna
but
have
Vikla is
faith.
slightly less bad.
I'm gonna have faith in 100 Thieves on this one because even though Quid's been bad, I think he has gotten better. I think he's on the right trajectory, and I would say the same thing about Someday as well. Guys that I think, well, I think that they really need those guys to look good for you to have success. FlyQuest, better week. I think their opponents sucked this week though. So yes, FlyQuest looked a lot better, but I think TL trolled against them. Immortals is
NRG was one of those
Immortals.
opponents. You just said that they were gonna go 6-3. They're beast.
I think Energy is better than how they've been playing.
Okay. We got Dignitas versus Evil Geniuses LG in there. They tried to slip that in there midway through the split.
If
Luckily,
they've
both of us
been
caught that.
if they've been EGLG this whole split long, someone let us know. We just realized this week.
Well, LOL
I was
Esports only
going to
updated it this week.
I was gonna pop quiz JNT 250 on this one and see if he knew what EG's name was. And he asked me before the show if I saw that it was LG, and I was like, gosh.
I'm
I
picking
guess yeah,
EG.
it's on the thing now. So yeah, this has to be the week because we would have seen it when we
Yeah,
were doing our
I went
predictions
and
last
checked.
time. Okay. Um, Evil Geniuses.
Cloud9 versus Golden Guardians.
I know
Now,
you want me to. I know, but I'm not going to.
okay, well, then we will
Cloud
move on
Nine,
to Energy versus Team Liquid, and I'll be picking Team Liquid.
NRG.
All right.
This is my upset.
And
I
then
told you last week I need to take more upsets. This is my upset.
first game Thursday, we have FlyQuest versus Golden Guardians, and I think I'm gonna go with FlyQuest. So
Golden Guardians.
this will get spicy here. We got
I
Cloud9
feel way
versus
more
Dignitas.
comfortable. I feel way more comfortable in Golden Guardians over FlyQuest than I do the NRG over TL. But I'm going Golden Guardians.
We got
Even
Cloud9
though
versus
I
Flight.
am rocking the FlyQuest jersey too this week because I feel like it helped them last week. I don't know if it'll help them this week though.
Cloud9.
Cloud9.
TSM versus NRG. This is kind of close game. This man, am I gonna take TSM
NRG.
here?
NRG.
I'm gonna go with TSM.
Okay.
Well, actually, I'll preface it by saying I feel like NRG's performance on Wednesday will influence my pick when Thursday morning arrives.
Fair enough. Yeah,
Uh,
I swapped last week because they yanked Insanity out of the lineup, so I feel like it's fair to make swaps before if you would like.
we got Evil Geniuses versus 100 Thieves. Oh man,
EG.
I might be picking 100 Thieves. I might be going kind of crazy this week.
Hmm.
I don't know.
JNT's the
This is
crackhead now.
difficult.
I'm going Evil Geniuses. LG.
I'll go 100 Thieves for now, but
Okay, and then we
I
got TL Immortals.
if Ikla wasn't, I mean, sorry, if Quid wasn't inting so bad, I'd feel way more confident in making this pick because I feel like he could just get absolutely clapped by JoJo, and the game will be over in 10 minutes. But I don't know. Okay, Team Liquid versus Immortals. Team Liquid, obviously.
Team Liquid. Dignitas versus Fly, the first game on Friday. I'm gonna go Fly.
Same. I don't know. I'm surprised you even hesitated there.
Yeah. Well, clearly I don't think FlyQuest is that good yet. I'm not sold on them yet, but obviously I think Dignitas is just worse.
Then we
NRG Evil Geniuses.
EG for me.
EG
C9 versus Immortals, C9.
Cloud9.
TL versus 100. I guess I'm going with the 100 Thieves 3-0. I've kind of committed to it.
Wow.
I
You
don't
got
know.
Team
I don't
Liquid.
know. I don't know how I feel about this right now, to be honest. But
Team Liquid for me, and then Golden Guardians TSM. Golden Guardians is going to smack them.
Golden Guardians, yes.
Okay, we got a lot of quick news to get through. A lot of stuff.
And oh my god, I'm delaying it because I'm slow on the bringing this other stuff down. But yes, a lot of
Okay,
first up, big news, somewhat potentially. Rumor according to Travis Gafford, TSM's spot in the LCS has already been sold slash a partner has potentially been found.
yeah, he made sure to say that it was not a report and that it was just rumors, but it sounds like they might have a partner and or have sold the team already. My reaction to hearing this was, who the fuck wants to partner with TSM?
Yeah.
But watching me like, at first I'm flaming whoever's partnering with them, and then it's like TSM Mr. Beast or something, and I'm like,
Oh,
no.
please no. Please no.
I don't know who ends up wanting to, who thinks TSM is a good business partner, but may God have mercy on their soul, or whatever people say. I don't know.
I mean, I guess if it is a partnership, I wonder if the name of TSM will remain in the LCS because we did see over in the LEC there was Koi, which you know Rogue didn't outright sell their spot; they partnered with Koi, and Koi took over the naming rights of the team. So I wonder if TSM, whatever partnership, if it is a partnership they introduce, if they'll still use that TSM name because I think that name still holds a lot of value, and maybe it's worthwhile keeping that name instead of completely rebranding or something.
One of the reasons why I can't wait for this report or whatever it is to come out, of course it's going to come out like in 2 hours when we're done recording or whatever. Um, One of the things that I can't wait to find out is, if it is a partnership, does that mean they're not going to like the LPL? Because I don't think you can have a stake in an LPL team and an LCS team. Because
Yeah, I don't believe you can do that anymore.
so if it is a partnership, which again we're getting ahead of ourselves here, what happened, TSM? What happened to the we're going somewhere else?
Yeah.
Um, I guess we'll have to wait
Maybe
and
the
see.
partnership was too good to refuse or something. Be
Or maybe none of the leagues wanted fucking TSM in their league.
also true.
Who knows?
Next up, kind of also pretty big news somewhat. A lot of content creators have been trying to join NACL, and it was reported that Tyler One was outright denied by Riot to join NACL, although he still expresses interest in joining potentially. But very interesting that I think Riot denied him, considering he's kind of been their poster child for the last couple of years, especially in terms of the NA fan base, because he's been promoted by Riot a lot over the last 3 to 4 years. And the fact that they now deny him is kind of weird to me.
Poster child might be a little extreme considering he was once banned.
They market the crap out of him ever since he's been unbanned. So
Yeah.
they
It,
brought him
it
on the
is.
broadcast tons of times. He's always at the All Star events, making appearances and involvement within the games or the tournament, whatever it is. So
I
that's all
would
I'm
be
saying.
very curious to know why they would have denied him, because it gives me the. It reminds me of when they wouldn't let like Doublift in, or no, they wouldn't let Bjergsen. Who was it that they wouldn't let play in the Mr. Beast
Bjergsen.
thing?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Bjergsen.
And it was like, dude, big opportunity. People want to watch these people. And it's like, I feel like viewership, even if it is just for NACL, viewership in League of Legends goes way up if Tyler One has a team. Like, don't get me wrong, it's cool that Toast has one and all, but like, I'm not watching Toast team. I might watch Tyler One's team because on his co-stream, he's going to be flaming the shit out of his own players.
Yeah.
like, like I want to watch that.
I haven't even really been checking in the performance lately of DSG. I know they've been decent, and they lost to FlyQuest the very pretty recently. They got
Rumors,
2
fake
0'd.
gods popping off.
Yeah, this is true.
Rumor has it Fake God is a
I've heard
god.
about this.
I would like
But
to
in
see Fake God
addition,
have another little bounce back, like kind of like Dokla esque,
yeah,
Wasn't so good, goes down to academy, gets his shit together, comes back to the LCS, and is an absolute starter, like for sure. I would like to see that with Fake God. That'd be cool.
And in addition to Tyler One, there are other content creators that are also rumored to have interest. So those include Ludwig, Moist Critical. They're sort of uh, MXM org to have. I don't know the full name, but I know
Hmm.
the abbreviation's MXM. And then
Isn't
as
it
well,
Moist Moguls?
yeah, that's what it is, Moist Moguls.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Beast, obviously, his name is in there, but not a surprise considering he's been vocal about it. So interesting that maybe Mr. Beach did reach out to Riot at some point within the last couple months. So that's something. If he's
Here's my
interested,
theory,
if he's at
JNT.
the table, that's pretty big. If he's at the table,
Here's my theory, and I need you to agree with me. Riot is too afraid of their NACL viewership being higher than their LCS viewership.
well, I mean, I honestly, that's not. Yeah, I don't think even that's that not. What am I trying to say? That's not that outlandish to think that. But I do think that if Mr. Beast is going to be involved in League of Legends in any matter, he's going to get fast tracked into a tier one scene, whether it's the LCS or a different league around the world. Maybe it somehow doesn't work in the LCS. I feel like any other region around the world should fast track him to a tier one spot.
Who's
So,
this Tyler One you're talking about?
no, Mr. Beast.
Oh, I see.
Like if Mr. Beast wants to get involved in the NACL, I feel like Riot should take it into a direction of how can we get this guy to buy an LCS team instead of buying a slot in the NACL. Like they need Riot should be actively figuring out a way to get him into the LCS if he is expressing interest, and that's what kind of what I mentioned. If
Hmm.
Mr. Beast has truly expressed interest and reached out to Riot in any capacity over the last couple of months with regards to the NACL, that is really big because Riot should use that and push it towards getting him a team in the LCS.
That's interesting.
At this
I feel
point,
like it's a little
at this
slimy
point,
though.
I feel like if you needed to take a loss as the LCS to get Mr. Beast in the LCS, you could potentially recover your rapidly declining viewership.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, that's why I think when I heard this, it's like you're crazy to deny all these people, because yeah, you need to stem the bleeding. You need to turn things around because this region is losing viewers more and more and more and more. Do something, my God, man. They're always like they're changing I mean, we've talked so many times about how the broadcast has been changed, the hours and what days. They're like,
People,
oh yeah, we want the viewership in North America to be good, but oh, what about Europe? We need to make sure the European viewers can watch. And oh, what about Africa? Got to make sure the African viewers can watch. And it's like, dude,
what
do
about the NA
something for North
viewers?
America. Do something for North American fans. For the love of God, let Tyler One, Mr. Beast, and whoever the fuck wants a team have one if they're gonna grow viewership.
Nothing much else to add about that, I guess. Then, because
Okay,
that's all there is to say. Like this is
yeah.
they need to be doing what they can to salvage this.
What's next?
Uh, this is all in general sad news. Faker, there was a Reddit post on that was front page today that Faker apparently is having a lot of arm, health issues with his arms.
This got me worried, as I'm sure you're not surprised, Jinter. But obviously, when you hear wrist issues, it's Monka S. We've seen it with Uzi, for example. Once Uzi had really serious wrist issues, he was out for quite some time. Faker, you don't want to hear that happening with him. But I guess I shouldn't pretend like I'm surprised when you play pro league for like a decade and you play, especially in the Korean scene, when you're like nonstop playing. It's bound to happen. We don't exactly know how serious this stuff is yet, but like that could really affect the goat's career. So to me, this is big news. That's just we don't know exactly how to think of it just yet.
Yeah, there's not really a lot about it in the Reddit post. It kind of just talks about that Faker's getting treatment on his arm and that they've started treatment for it, and
Hmm.
they'll have to see how much it improves. But there was nothing as it pertains to him potentially needing to take extended time off or miss games or anything like that. So as of right now, Faker's still going to be playing. Who knows what changes behind the scenes potentially with how much he's scrimming with the team. Makes me wonder even right now who the T1 sub mid laner is, because usually they have somebody very, very good in the wings to potentially come in and step in if Faker doesn't play for any number of reasons. So, because obviously T1 sub mid laners have a pretty good track record in the world of just being absolutely insane.
Mm,
Scout, closer, whoever it is.
yeah, Monka S though. Monka Yes. Oh,
Yep.
also in the same thing, Goomba Goomba's passing out, and that was just kind of like an edit into the same
Yeah,
Reddit
it's
post.
just a throw in at the end. Oh, by the way, like our 80 carry. Oh yeah, that guy passed out 2 times this week and had to get taken to the hospital.
I thought they said maybe I don't remember. I thought it was we'll go to the hospital if he passes out a third time, and I'm like, bro, what? Maybe I
No, it
remember it
said
wrong.
no, it said in here he went to the hospital the second time.
Oh,
But I
okay.
mean, they did say that there was nothing serious. So I wonder if it's sort of exhaustion, dehydration potentially, as opposed to like actual health issues or anything like that. He's just grinding too
What's
much.
what's going on over there?
He's grinding.
Yeah.
He's
It kind of
probably
felt like
hitting
that
a
should be its own Reddit post, but
he's
it was just
probably
sprinkled in.
he was probably just hitting like a nice little 6 hour solo queue session and then his
Mhm.
body gave out at the end.
Yeah. Anyways, hope those guys are better because when they're at their best, T1 is going to be a world's competitor. So yeah, we hope that that gets fixed. 2v2v2v2
Oh,
kind of looks
epic.
beast. I haven't watched a
Epic.
lot of it admittedly, but from the little bit that I have watched, I'm like, "Oh, this is kind of cool."
I've been watching so much of it. It looks so fun. I forgot my PvE account expired because they expire if you don't use them. So I don't have a PvE account right
From
now.
like oh, PvE. I thought you said PvE. I
No.
was like I thought maybe you had an account for when the Star Guardian
You
thing
have to
happened,
like you
like
have to like actively use the PvE account. Like, I don't know what the time period is. Like maybe it's 3 months or maybe it's 6 months or 9 months or something like that. But you have to use it
Mm.
somewhat frequently to keep your account, or you have to like reapply for one. So I haven't
That's
been able to
probably a
play
good
it yet.
idea.
It is because
That's pr
the server size is so much smaller. I don't know what it is,
yeah,
but they say it's really really small in comparison to the actual player base. But it looks so
yeah.
much fun. I've been watching so many videos on it. I mean, for the people who don't know what it is, like it kind of has it's 2v2v2v2. It has special maps designed for it. There's a whole different. I mean, the way that you buy items is different. You don't like gain gold. I mean, you gain gold, but every single item costs 3,000, and you get augments like you do in TFT to sort
Yeah.
of upgrade your champion. You're not playing vanilla League of Legends. Obviously, it's all the same in terms of the champions you're playing and the abilities that you're pressing, but you can kind of get like some wacky stuff going on where you get like a bunch of extra ability haste or a bunch of extra bonus HP, and you can do some pretty cool things with certain champions. So the
When
game it's going to be so much fun. It feels like it's going to take over, and I assume people are going to be begging for like a ranked mode within a month of it.
yeah, my instinct when I first heard about it was like, "Are we gonna have, like, a new esport on our hands here?" And I don't know if I'm ready to say that yet, but that was what I was wondering. I don't know if I could say that just after watching a few games. I don't know if it has the legs yet. One of the biggest deterrents seems to be augments and RNG. I don't know how much, like, RNG plays into how good or bad the augments are, but it feels like that could be a deterrent to having a balanced game, which don't get me wrong, you could always balance it, right? But RNG is not usually something you want in an esport.
Yeah, even though there's TFT augments. Lamau.
I thought you were gonna make an RNG like the LPL team joke, and I was like, oh no.
Oh, I didn't even that hadn't even thought it didn't even occur.
Yeah, but anyways, so you haven't played it yet at all?
No, I haven't played it. I've just watched a ton of videos of people
But
playing it.
interesting. Yeah.
I
Anyways, I
want to
was
play
losing my
so badly.
mind. I was laughing my ass off watching Sneaky and Medios duo. That was so funny.
A few of the people that Cagel's been playing with have also been pretty funny.
Anyways, looks cool. I will be watching more of it. Let's talk about Vitality.
Yeah, they benched Bo. They had replaced their Vitality B jungler Douglas, played in the LEC this past week. Vitality has lost both of those games. They officially got knocked out of the LEC group stage, so they're one of the two teams at the bottom of the regular season that's not going to advance to the group stage. So they're not completely out of Worlds running or the grand finale, whatever they call their extra thing at the end of it, because they have a lot of championship points from winter and spring. But interesting to see that Bo got benched and they brought in a new jungler, and kind of begs the question if this guy is actually a long term replacement or if Bo is just taking a bit of a break.
I get the feeling that it's not a short-term thing. I did it feel weird to you when he tweeted out the thing of him having a smoke there?
I don't know.
Like,
It
was that
was
BM?
Maybe a little bit.
For me, it comes off as BM, but I'm not going to pretend like I didn't think it was hilarious because I absolutely did. But to me, it feels like I'm so happy to see my team lose, and I feel like this might be an unpopular opinion. So please feel free to tell me I'm wrong in the comments section or in the chat. I take this as like, bro, you even if you get benched, you should never be cheering against your own team. Now, maybe he wasn't. It's just a picture of him smoking. But to me, that kind of gives off like this really felt like an XD, like, yeah, you thought you could bench me and have success, and I'm happy you lost. That's the read I get it from this tweet.
It felt
But
like a bit of a
again,
meme to me.
there's no words, right? So this could be one of those areas where I'm reading too much into it as well.
Feels a bit similar to the Diplex thing last split where it was that game against Golden Guardians where MNS was running it down and Diplex was in like Twitch chat going like why lose or something. I forget what
That
exactly
wasn't
it was.
actually Diplex though. Wasn't that somebody else? That
Oh, I
wasn't
thought that
Diplex's
was
account. That was somebody else that made a Diplex. Yeah, that
oh,
wasn't
I
actually
thought
him.
that oh. I thought that was like actually him that whole time.
No, my
Oh.
understanding was that it
I
was
didn't know that.
somebody else that made an account.
Oh.
Yeah, because
Pretty
then
funny
people
by that
tweeted out. I think
guy.
Spica tweeted it or something. It was a joke. It was a joke, whatever it was. Um, but yeah, it feels BM to me, honestly. I always felt like, and maybe you could tell me is different from your background. Growing up playing hockey or baseball, like okay, hockey's the perfect example. If ever there was a goalie, because you have two goalies on like a team, if ever there was a goalie that like got benched or got pulled, all the goalies I played with were always still very talkative with each other, always trying to help one another, regardless of who was playing. There was never like the I want to see this guy fail. And this was kids, right? And I feel like with esports, there's a lot of times the, oh, this guy took my spot. I hope he crashes and burns. And I totally get the instinct to have that, but I think it is very mature and even so respectable to the people that say, I don't give a shit. Even if I'm benched, I'm going to do whatever I can to help my team win, even if that means helping the guy that just subbed in. What do you think?
Well,
Is that a stupid take?
no, I mean it'll be evident in the long term. Players that want to improve and want their team to succeed probably end up lasting longer than the people that are just out for themselves.
I agree, and I feel like esports players in general, I'm overgeneralizing here, admittedly, but I feel like in general they're very selfish and very help me with the word here, Jinter.
Don't know the word you're looking for.
Spiteful, is that a right word? I don't know.
Maybe, kind of.
Whatever the word is, they're just not happy for their teammates doing well. Whereas I think even if you get benched, I feel like you should try to help your team win, even if that means just going through the VOD saying, like, especially in a best of five, like you're helping your jungler who subbed out for you or subbed in for you, and you're like, hey, I noticed that their jungler's doing this with their pathing. You can exploit it through blah 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 blah. Like that's the player that I want on my team. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyways, I digress.
Clid got benched from Hama Life, even though Hama Life they've not been doing so well this split. A bit sad about that as a Hama Life fan, but apparently Clid is getting some sexual harassment allegations because of some messages that he was sending this girl, and this girl approached the team with this evidence and stuff like that, and sounds like a bad situation.
Yikes. I didn't even read I forgot to read there was a Reddit post of it. I forgot to read whatever the hell it was.
Yeah, it was talking about how he was sending explicit messages to a girl saying like derogatory things or something like that, and then she tried to reconcile internally, and then that didn't happen. So she went to like the actual org with the evidence and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
bad
yeah, yeah.
situation.
League players, man.
Yeah,
I shouldn't say anything. I haven't read anything about it, but that sucks.
yeah, not the
Don't do
best.
that.
Last
Uh
up, if anybody remembers Soul, that guy who TSM claimed was a top 4 top laner in the LCS before swiftly uh, cutting and benching him like 2 weeks later, he retired from League. But just the fact that he's kind of been made into a meme in my eyes, where TSM touted him as a top 4 top laner and then cut ties with him within 2 months, is pretty funny.
it's funny because of how it's TSM, but it's not funny to him, right? Like you feel bad for Soul because like get baited, idiot. Like they pump his tires, they tell him, "Hey, we believe in you," and they just fucking didn't. They clearly didn't believe in him. They clearly just were like, "Hey, let's just throw in someone who's cheap and we don't have to pay much." Very similar to what's going on with TSM now, by the way. Feels bad. I feel like that's just not how to treat a player. Like don't give false hope and then just let someone go. And it's sad to see that his career never recovered from that.
Yeah, I believe he was on like EG Academy for a little bit, and then it wasn't on a team this whole past,
Yeah.
I guess, few months.
But it's possible that regardless of TSM, maybe he just doesn't want to play the game anymore, regardless of what happened. So maybe it has nothing to do with TSM and he's just done, you know? But
But it probably is TSM.
rip soul. Not a long career, not a great one, but a memorable one. That's it for this episode, right?
I do believe so.
Okay, we got through all the quick news. We got through the episode. Thank you guys for joining us. Next week, I don't know exactly what time we're going to be live next week. I don't know if I'm going to be back here in Sarnia or not. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out.
We'll
For
see.
now, the plan is to be live at the regular time, but I just want to let people know, our regular listeners know, that there may be a different time that the episode is made available. So if that happens, we apologize. But as always, I'll tweet when we go live. I'll continue to do that, and so follow me on Twitter if you want that mention for when we go live, and then obviously it'll be up on YouTube shortly after we tweet, because whenever we record the live episode, it goes up on YouTube pretty much right after in like an hour or so.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Remember, subscribe, comment, like all that stuff, and we will see you guys next time. This has been episode 131 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.